The sky had been heavy all day, but when the first drop of rain fell, it came fast and without mercy. One moment the air was still. The next the heavens broke open. The storm roared across the forest like a beast released from chains. Trees bent under the force of the wind. Branches snapped and leaves swirled in wild circles. The traveler pulled his coat tighter, but it did little against the cold water pouring down. His boots sank into mud with each step. He tried to stay on the narrow path, but the rain blurred everything. The forest, once calm, had turned into a sea of shadows. He knew he had to find shelter. The storm was not going to end quickly. Water soaked through his clothes and ran down his face. His breath came out in clouds of mist as the temperature dropped. Lightning cracked above the trees, followed by a thunder that shook the ground. It felt like the sky itself was splitting apart. For a moment he thought he saw movement between the trees. A shape, tall and strange, flickered in the flashes of lightning. He stopped, heart racing. Was it just a trick of the storm? He blinked, but the figure was gone. Only the forest remained, dark and wild. He shook his head and pressed on. This was no time to imagine ghosts. Then he saw it, a dark opening in the side of a rocky hill. A cave. At first it looked like a black mouth yawning wide, waiting to swallow anything that dared step inside. But right now it was his only chance. He hurried toward it, slipping on wet rocks, splashing through puddles. The cave was larger than he expected. Its entrance sloped upward slightly, keeping the rain from flooding in. The moment he stepped inside, the roar of the storm softened. The wind still howled outside, but here at least he was shielded. He shook off his coat, water dripping onto the stone floor, and let out a long breath. But as he looked deeper into the cave, unease crept into him. The walls seemed to stretch farther than they should. Darkness pressed in like a living thing. The air smelled of wet stone, but also something faint, something he couldn't place. It was not the smell of animals nor of fresh earth. It was different. The storm raged behind him, but his eyes stayed fixed on the black tunnel leading deeper inside. The silence there felt wrong. Even in caves, there were usually the sounds of dripping water or small creatures scuttling. Here there was only stillness. He told himself not to overthink. He only needed a place to wait out the storm. Nothing more. He placed his bag against the wall and sat down, his back to the stone. His body trembled from the cold, but slowly warmth returned. He closed his eyes, listening to the rain hammering the world outside. But just as he began to feel safe, a sound reached his ears. Soft, almost like a whisper. He froze. His eyes snapped open. It came again, faint, carried through the cave. Not from outside, not from the storm, but from deeper inside. It was a thin sound, fragile, like a whimper or a cry. His chest tightened. He leaned forward, straining to hear. For a moment the sound faded, drowned by thunder. He wondered if he had imagined it. Then it came again, clearer this time. Weak, broken, almost human, but not quite. The traveler stood slowly. His torch was small, but it was all he had. With a shaky hand he lit it. The flame flickered, pushing back the shadows just enough to see the walls glisten with damp stone. He hesitated, every instinct warning him to stay near the entrance. But the sound pulled at him, demanding attention. Step by step he moved forward. The cave floor was uneven, scattered with rocks. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, echoing like footsteps. The flame trembled, as if nervous too. His heart pounded, each beat louder than the last. The sound grew softer, almost retreating as he moved closer. It was no longer just a sound. It carried weight, emotion. It was not the growl of an animal nor the hiss of the wind. It was something alive, something suffering. He stopped and held his breath. Another flash of lightning lit the cave entrance behind him, throwing long shadows across the stone. For a brief second it looked as if the shadows were moving on their own. The storm outside had driven him here for safety. But now, standing in the half-dark with strange sounds ahead and the storm behind, he wondered if he had made a mistake. Still, something in him refused to turn back. Whatever was ahead, whatever voice or cry echoed through this cave, he had to know. He had to see. And so, torch in hand, with the storm cut off by the walls of stone, he stepped deeper into the unknown. The traveler walked deeper into the cave, torchlight trembling in his hand. Each step echoed off the stone, bouncing back at him like a warning. The storm outside had faded into a dull roar, distant now, as if the world beyond the cave no longer existed. Here there was only darkness, silence, and that strange sound he had heard. The cave grew colder, moist air clung to his skin, and his breath hung in front of him like smoke. His footsteps crunched on loose stones, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. He stopped once, convinced he had heard something behind him, but when he turned, there was nothing. Only the black mouth of the cave, the storm faintly visible in the distance. Then it came again. That sound, this time it was closer, a thin cry, almost like a child, but different. The tone was not quite human. It held pain, fear, and something else, something alien. The traveler's stomach tightened. Every part of him screamed to turn back, to leave before he found the source. But something stronger kept him moving forward. Curiosity, concern, a need to know what was hiding here. The path narrowed, forcing him to squeeze between sharp rocks that jutted out like teeth. His torch flickered, casting shadows that danced along the walls. The sound came again, softer now, as if the cave itself was swallowing it. He pressed forward, heart hammering in his chest. At one point he stopped and listened carefully. The cry had changed. Now it was not one voice, but two. One deeper, weaker, almost like a moan. The other higher, fragile, filled with hunger or sorrow. They rose and fell together, then faded into silence again. The traveler licked his dry lips. It was unmistakable now. Someone or something was suffering inside this cave. He crouched low, moving more carefully, trying not to make noise. The walls glistened with dampness. His torchlight caught marks on the stone. Faint scratches as though claws or hands had scraped there long ago. Were they signs of struggle? A warning? Or just the marks of time? He couldn't tell. The sound came again, pulling him onward. Finally, the narrow tunnel opened into a wider chamber. His torchlight spread across the space, revealing jagged walls and a floor littered with rocks. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like the teeth of a monster. Water dripped steadily from one of them, each drop hitting the ground with a hollow echo. He stopped at the edge of the chamber. He held his breath. The cries were louder here, and then through the flickering light he saw movement. Two shapes huddled in the far corner, small, shaking. The traveler's throat went dry. At first he thought they might be animals, perhaps wolves or some unknown cave dwellers. But as his eyes adjusted, he realized these were no ordinary creatures. One was larger, curled around the other protectively. The smaller shape trembled, its tiny frame pressed against the other's body. Both were thin, their bones visible under pale skin. Or was it skin at all? The torchlight revealed a texture unlike human flesh, almost translucent, faintly glowing in places where veins pulsed with soft light. The larger one, clearly a mother, lifted its head slightly. Eyes glowed faintly in the dark, not with anger but with fear. She pulled the smaller one closer, as if shielding it from him. The child made a weak noise, a whimper that pierced the silence and reached the traveler's chest like a blade. He froze. His instincts clashed inside him. One part told him to run, to leave now before they attacked. Another part whispered that these creatures were not enemies. They were desperate. The mother's gaze locked on him. Her breathing was shallow, weak, as if she had not eaten in days. She did not move to attack. She did not move at all except to hold the child tighter. The traveler raised his torch a little, his free hand lifted slowly to show he carried no weapon. I won't hurt you, he whispered, though he knew they could not understand his words. The mother flinched at the sound of his voice. Her eyes flicked to the child, then back to him. The child's hand, tiny and trembling, reached out, not toward him directly but into the air as if searching for something, anything. The sound that left its mouth was soft, broken, like a plea. The traveler's chest ached at the sight. He realized now what he had stumbled upon. These were not monsters waiting in the dark. They were lost, abandoned, starving. The silence stretched. The only sounds were the dripping water and the faint cries of the child. The traveler lowered his torch slightly, letting the shadows return. He did not step closer, not yet. He knew sudden movement might frighten them. But in his mind a question formed, heavy and unshakable. Who were they? Why were they here? And who had left them in this place to suffer? He did not yet know the answers. But he knew one thing with certainty. His journey had changed. This cave was no longer just a shelter from the storm. It was the beginning of something far greater. The cries echoed once more, and in that sound the traveler felt his own fate being rewritten. The traveler stood frozen at the edge of the chamber, his torch shaking slightly in his hand. The light flickered across the two figures pressed against the wall. The mother's body was curled around her child like a shield. Her thin arms trembled, her glowing eyes fixed on him, full of fear and exhaustion. For a long moment no one moved, only the dripping of water filled the air. The traveler's breath came heavy, each inhale loud in the silence. He tried to convince himself this was not real, that his mind was inventing shapes out of shadows. But the child stirred, its tiny head lifting weakly, and he knew without doubt, they were alive. He had read stories of strange creatures, of ancient myths whispered in villages. But this was no tale. This was flesh and bone here before him. Alien, yes, but not a threat. Not in their condition. The traveler took a cautious step forward. The mother reacted instantly. A soft hiss escaped her throat, weak but sharp, and she pulled the child tighter. Her body shook as if the effort alone might break her. She was trying to protect the little one, though she barely had the strength to stand. The torchlight revealed their faces more clearly now. Their skin was pale, almost translucent. Veins glowing faintly beneath the surface like faint blue rivers. Their eyes were large, reflecting light in a way that made them shimmer unnaturally. Their bodies were thin, starved of food and strength. The child's stomach was sunken, its hands tiny and trembling. The traveler's throat tightened. They were suffering, starving, abandoned. He knelt slowly, lowering himself to their level. He placed the torch on a rock so his hands would be free, keeping his movements slow and gentle. From his bag, he pulled out a piece of dried bread and a small flask of water. His voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "I don't know if you can understand me," he said, "but you look hungry." The mother's glowing eyes followed his every movement, suspicious, wary. She did not move to take the food. Her arms stayed wrapped around the child, her breathing shallow. The traveler could see her ribs, each one sharp under her skin. He realized then that she was starving as much as her child, yet she had given everything to protect it. The child whimpered again, the sound weak and heartbreaking. Its tiny hand reached out, not toward him, but toward the flask of water. The traveler placed the food and water on the ground between them and pushed it gently forward. He did not try to touch them. He only waited. For a long time, the mother did not move. Her glowing eyes flicked between him, the food, and her child. Then with a slow and trembling motion, she stretched out one hand. Her fingers were long and thin, almost delicate. She touched the flask first, as if testing it. When nothing happened, she pulled it closer. She lifted it to her lips, hesitated, then passed it to the child instead. The little one drank greedily, water spilling down its chin. The sound of its desperate gulps filled the cave. The traveler's chest ached at the sight. When the child finished, the mother finally drank, but only a little. She pushed the flask back toward him, as if afraid to take more than her share. Her glowing eyes met his, and for the first time they held something other than fear. Gratitude. The traveler pushed the bread forward next. The mother broke a piece and gave it to the child, who chewed slowly, savoring every bite. She ate only after the child had finished, her hands shaking so much she nearly dropped it. He watched them in silence, 1,000 thoughts racing through his mind. Who were they? Where had they come from? Why were they here, hidden in a cave, left to starve? Then he noticed something else. On the wall behind them, faint symbols were scratched into the stone. Curved lines, circles, shapes that did not belong to any human language he knew. They glowed faintly, like the veins beneath their skin. The traveler felt a chill run down his spine. These creatures were not just strangers. They had a story, a history, maybe even a message carved into the stone itself. The mother followed his gaze and shifted slightly, blocking his view of the markings. It was clear she did not want him to see. The traveler leaned back, giving her space. He did not want to push too far. Trust, if it came at all, would come slowly. But as he watched the child press closer to its mother, as he heard the faint sound of relief in its breathing, he understood one truth with painful clarity. These were not monsters. These were survivors. And now their survival depended on him. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the cave, a new bond was beginning to form. Fragile, uncertain, but real. The traveler did not know what dangers still lay deeper in the cave or beyond it. But one thing was certain. The moment he chose to step forward, the moment he shared his food and water, his fate became tied to theirs. And whatever had abandoned them here might not be gone for long. The traveler sat on the cold stone floor, his torch resting on a rock beside him. The cave was quiet now, except for the steady dripping of water and the soft breathing of the mother and her child. The storm outside still raged, but its fury felt far away. In this chamber, another storm was unfolding, one made of fear, hunger, and uncertainty. The mother clutched the child close to her chest. Her glowing eyes never left the traveler, even as she fought to stay upright. Every muscle in her thin body trembled with weakness. She looked like she could collapse at any moment. Yet, despite her state, she held on with fierce determination, as if her strength existed only to protect the little one. The child stirred, small hands trembling. Its face was pale, almost colorless except for the faint glow that pulsed beneath its skin. It looked at the traveler, its wide eyes filled with something more powerful than words: need, hunger, hope. The traveler's heart tightened. He could not understand their language, but he did not need to. The silent plea was clear. Help us, save us. Do not leave us here. He pulled his bag closer and searched inside. He had little to give. A few more pieces of dried bread, half a flask of water, some nuts wrapped in cloth. Enough for one man, maybe 2 days if he stretched it. But now sharing meant his supplies would vanish quickly. He stared at the food in his hand. His mind argued against his heart. If he gave too much, he would starve. If he gave too little, they might not survive the night. His fingers trembled as he weighed the choice. The child made a faint sound, half cry, half breath. It reached out again, its tiny hand shaking in the torchlight. That was enough. The traveler placed the bread and nuts gently on the ground between them. The mother hesitated. Her glowing eyes darted from him to the food, suspicion still sharp in her gaze. Then slowly she reached forward. Her hand shook as she took the offering. As if even that simple movement drained her strength, she gave the food to the child first, pressing the small pieces into its hands. The child ate hungrily, crumbs falling onto the stone. The traveler could almost feel its relief, the way life seemed to return to its weak body. When the child finished, the mother ate what was left. She chewed slowly, forcing herself to savor each bite. The traveler watched, silent. He felt a strange weight settle on his chest. These beings were not dangerous. They were fragile, and somehow, without words, they had placed their survival in his hands. When they finished, the mother leaned back against the wall, her breathing steadier now. The child curled up beside her, eyes half closing with exhaustion. The traveler thought they might sleep, but then something unexpected happened. The mother's gaze softened. She looked at him, not with fear this time, but with something closer to trust. Her lips moved, forming sounds he could not understand. It was not human speech, but it was gentle, careful, a language of her own. He could not reply. He only shook his head slightly and said, "I don't understand." His voice echoed in the chamber. The mother seemed to realize this. She lowered her head, then lifted one hand and pressed it to her chest. A simple gesture. Then she touched the child gently as if saying, "This is me. This is mine. This is my reason." The traveler understood the meaning, if not the words. He placed his own hand on his chest. "Me," he said quietly. His name felt unnecessary. The gesture was enough. For a moment, something passed between them. Not language, but recognition. A bridge built out of desperation. Then the child stirred again. Its tiny hand reached toward him, fingers trembling as if asking for more. Not just food, not just water, but safety, protection. The traveler felt the weight of that small gesture press down on him like stone. He had not come here to find anyone. He had been running from the storm, searching only for his own survival, and now somehow 2 lives depended on him. He wanted to promise them safety, to promise he would protect them, feed them, keep them alive. But fear held him back. What if he could not? What if danger came and he failed? The mother seemed to sense his hesitation. Her glowing eyes searched his face. Then she did something that surprised him. She lowered her head, bowing it slightly as if in silent surrender. Not to him, but to fate itself. It was her plea. Her only way of saying, "Please, help us. We have nothing else." The traveler's chest burned. He looked at the child, fragile and small, and the mother, starved yet unbroken. He could not walk away. Even if it meant risking his own life, even if it meant facing whatever had driven them into this cave, he could not turn his back. His hand tightened into a fist. His choice was clear. He leaned forward, his voice firm though quiet. "I'll help you," he whispered, knowing they could not understand the words but hoping they would feel the meaning. The mother lifted her head. Her eyes glowed faintly brighter, like fading embers catching fire again. The child's tiny hand reached for him once more, this time steady as if it believed. And in that moment the bond was sealed. The storm outside had forced him into this cave. But now he realized the real storm was only beginning. The cave was quiet again. The storm outside had softened into steady rain, but the sounds inside were louder in the traveler's mind. The weak breaths of the mother, the small sighs of the child, and the echo of his own promise. "I'll help you." He had spoken without thinking, guided only by instinct. Now sitting in the shadows with his torch burning low, he began to understand the weight of his words. He was alone, deep in an unfamiliar cave with food and water that would barely last him 2 days. And yet he had just chosen to share those supplies with 2 starving beings who could not survive without him. His stomach growled softly. He ignored it. The child stirred, pressing closer to the mother's side. The traveler noticed the way the mother stroked the child's thin arm, her glowing fingers trembling but careful. She was trying to keep the little one calm, even as her own body failed her. It was a small act, but it struck him harder than the storm outside. He could leave, he thought. Walk out of the cave. Return to the forest. Search for a village or a road. He could pretend he had never seen them. But as soon as the thought entered his mind, he felt the child's gaze on him, those wide, glowing eyes filled with silent trust. The image rooted him to the ground. No, leaving was no longer an option. The traveler pulled his bag closer and opened it again. He studied its contents, counting carefully. 3 pieces of dried bread, a handful of nuts, half a flask of water. He also carried a small knife, a coil of rope, and flint for fire. Not much, barely enough for 1 man. But now it had to be enough for 3. He broke 1 piece of bread in half, setting it aside for later. He would ration what he had, giving more to the mother and child, less to himself. He could endure hunger longer. They could not. He reached for his flask, lifting it to his lips, but stopped. Instead, he held it out toward the mother again. Her glowing eyes widened slightly. She hesitated, then accepted. She drank only a sip before giving the rest to the child. The traveler felt his throat burn with thirst, but he forced himself to smile faintly. They needed it more than he did. When the child finished, curling back against the mother's side, the traveler leaned back against the wall. His body ached with exhaustion, but his mind refused to rest. He needed a plan. If they were to survive, food had to be found. The forest outside might hold berries, roots, or game, but hunting with only a small knife was dangerous, and leaving them alone here in the cave was risky. He could not shake the feeling that the cave was not empty. The strange marks on the walls, the echo of footsteps he thought he had heard earlier. Something else was here. He turned his gaze toward the darkness beyond the chamber. The torchlight reached only so far, leaving the farthest corners hidden. The silence was too deep, too unnatural. The traveler's jaw tightened. Protecting them meant more than just food. It meant facing whatever else lurked in this place. He looked at the mother again. She was watching him closely now, her eyes filled with both fear and something new. Expectation. She had seen his choice in the way he shared his food and water. She understood even without words. The traveler nodded slightly as if to reassure her. "I won't leave you," he said quietly. The mother blinked slowly, her shoulders sagging with something like relief. The child let out a soft, contented sound, almost like a sigh. The decision was final. His life was no longer his alone. He tightened his grip on the small knife, holding it in his lap. It was not much, but it was all he had. He would fight if he had to. He would endure hunger if he had to. And he would not allow harm to come to them. The storm outside began to fade, the rain turning into a soft drizzle. Light from the moon spilled faintly into the cave's entrance, but it did not reach this chamber. Here there was only the glow of the torch, and the faint, natural glow of the beings beside him. He realized then that their light, though dim, was beautiful. Fragile, but beautiful. The traveler closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of their breathing calm him. His body begged for rest, but his mind stayed sharp. Every drip of water, every shift of stone made him tense. He knew danger was near. He could feel it in the air like the weight before a storm. Still, his choice held firm. He had stepped into this cave as a man running from the rain. Now he sat here as a guardian. bound by a promise he had never expected to make. The mother and child leaned against each other, their glowing forms faint in the dark. The traveler kept his eyes on the shadows, knife in hand, ready for what would come. The cave was not safe. He knew it. The unease in his chest grew with every heartbeat, but his decision was made and he would not go back. Whatever was waiting deeper inside this cave, he would face it. Not for himself. For them. The torch burned lower, its flame shrinking, shadows stretching longer across the stone walls. The traveler's eyelids felt heavy, but he refused to close them. Sleep was dangerous here. Every sound in the cave made him alert. The drip of water, the shuffle of loose pebbles, the faint rustle of air moving through unseen tunnels. The mother and child were asleep now, pressed close together. Their glow dimmed when they rested, soft as moonlight through fog. For the first time since he had found them, their breathing was calm. The traveler wanted to let them rest, but he could not shake the feeling that the cave was not theirs alone. He rose slowly, careful not to wake them, and lifted the torch. The flame flickered weakly, barely reaching the chamber's far wall. Beyond, the darkness seemed alive, pressing closer, daring him to step into it. He listened. At first only silence. Then there it was, a sound, faint but real, heavy, slow, like something shifting its weight against the stone. The traveler froze. His grip tightened on the knife. The sound came again. A dragging step, a scrape, then silence. He glanced at the mother and child. They slept on, unaware. For a moment he considered waking them, but he stopped. If danger was coming, they would need every scrap of strength they had. He stepped quietly toward the noise, torch raised high. His heart pounded so hard it felt louder than his footsteps. He moved past the carved symbols on the wall, their faint glow mocking him like secret eyes. The tunnel beyond was narrow, forcing him to squeeze between jagged rocks. The sound returned, closer now. A low rumble, deep and guttural, not human, not like the cries of the mother and child. This was something else. The traveler's skin prickled. He took another step and the smell hit him, a foul stench sharp and sour like rotting flesh mixed with wet earth. He gagged quietly, covering his mouth with his sleeve. Then, in the flicker of his torch, he saw it. A shadow moved at the edge of the light. Huge. Crawling along the stone, its body hunched and twisted. Its eyes caught the torchlight. 2 points of dull red that burned in the dark. The traveler stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. The creature froze as if testing him. Its body was long, its limbs stretched and bent at angles that seemed unnatural. The sound he had heard earlier, the dragging, the scraping, had come from its claws scraping against the stone. The creature exhaled, a growl rolling deep from its chest. The sound filled the tunnel, vibrating through the walls. The traveler's instinct screamed at him to run. But behind him, the mother and child slept. If he ran, they would not survive. He raised the knife, though it felt pitiful in his hand compared to the size of the thing watching him. The creature took one slow step forward. The torchlight caught its skin, thick, dark, covered in scars. Its jaw hung slightly open, revealing teeth jagged and uneven, sharp as broken glass. Drool dripped to the floor, sizzling faintly as it hit the damp stone. The traveler forced himself to hold his ground. He took a shaky breath and shouted, hoping his voice would carry more courage than he felt. "Stay back!" The echo bounced down the tunnel. The creature tilted its head as if curious. Then, slowly, it stepped backward. The red glow of its eyes dimmed as it melted into the darkness again. The traveler's shoulders sagged, relief washing over him. But it was short-lived, because even as the creature vanished, its growl rumbled once more, echoing from deeper inside the cave, not retreating, waiting, watching. He turned quickly and hurried back to the chamber. The mother stirred as he entered, her glowing eyes opening slowly. She looked at him, reading his face before he spoke a word. Fear flashed in her gaze. She understood. She whispered something in her language, soft and trembling, while pulling the child tighter to her chest. The child whimpered, sensing her fear. The traveler crouched beside them. His knife trembled in his hand. "We're not alone," he said quietly, though he knew they could not understand. "Something else is here." The mother's eyes darted toward the dark tunnel, her glow brightening slightly like a warning signal. She pressed her forehead gently to the child's, calming it, then looked back at the traveler. For the first time she reached out, Not to beg, not to plead, but to touch his arm lightly. A silent message. We trust you. Protect us. The traveler swallowed hard. His decision in Part 5 had been heavy enough. Now it was heavier. The cave held not just secrets, not just survivors, but a predator. One that had likely been the reason the mother and child were hiding here in the first place. He tightened his grip on the knife. His mind raced. He needed fire, more light, a stronger weapon. He needed a plan, but most of all he needed courage. Because the storm outside was ending. But the real storm, the one inside this cave, was only just beginning. The cave was no longer silent. From the tunnels came the growl again, low and steady, rolling like thunder under the stone. The mother held the child tight, her glowing arms wrapped around the small frame. The child whimpered, hiding its face against her chest. Their faint light flickered with fear. The traveler stood between them and the dark passage, knife in one hand, torch in the other. His heart pounded hard enough to shake his ribs, but he forced his feet to stay planted. He knew if he ran, the creature would tear through them in moments. The growl grew louder. Then came the scrape of claws on stone. The predator was moving closer. The traveler raised his torch high. Its flame sputtered, weak but defiant. He whispered to himself, "I won't let it take them." A shape appeared in the tunnel. Red eyes gleamed first, burning like embers. Then the twisted body followed, crawling low across the stone. Its limbs bent strangely, moving with an unnatural grace. Its skin was dark, stretched tight over muscles, and its jaw hung open, showing rows of jagged teeth dripping with foul saliva. The creature paused at the edge of the chamber. The torchlight reflected off its body and it hissed, the sound sharp and hungry. The traveler took a step forward. His legs shook, but his voice came firm. "Stay back." The creature answered with a roar, deep and furious, shaking dust from the ceiling. The child cried out, the sound small and helpless. The mother whispered something in her strange tongue, rocking the child to calm it. The predator lunged. The traveler swung the torch with all his strength. The fire met the creature's face and it recoiled with a screech, the smell of burning flesh filling the air. But it did not retreat far. Instead it circled, claws scratching against the stone floor, testing him. The traveler's arm ached from holding the torch. His knife felt too small, like a toy against such a beast, but he could not show weakness. He had to stand his ground. The creature lunged again. This time the traveler dropped low, rolling to the side. Its claws smashed into the wall where he had stood, stone splintering under the force. He thrust with his knife, striking its side. The blade pierced flesh, but only shallowly. The creature roared in pain, swinging its massive arm. The traveler was thrown across the chamber, his back slamming against stone. His breath left him in a gasp. The torch rolled away, its flame dimming but not dying. Shadows grew taller, swallowing the chamber in half-darkness. The creature turned toward the mother and child. Its red eyes locked onto them. It began to crawl forward, hunger burning in every step. "No," the traveler shouted, forcing himself to stand. His body screamed in pain, but he pushed through it. He grabbed the torch, its flame guttering, and charged. With a desperate cry, he slammed the fire into the creature's back. Flames licked across its skin and the stench grew stronger. The predator screeched, twisting wildly, trying to shake him off. The traveler held on, stabbing again and again with his knife. Each strike was weak, but together they built into fury. The beast threw him off at last. He crashed to the ground, pain exploding through his body. His knife slipped from his hand, skittering across the stone. The creature advanced again, slower now, wounded but not finished. Blood dripped from its side, dark and thick. Its growl was deeper, angrier. The traveler crawled toward the knife, every muscle screaming. The mother's glow brightened suddenly, filling the chamber with soft light. She was not running. She was standing, holding her child in one arm while raising her other hand toward the predator. Her glow pulsed, brightening like a heartbeat. The child's glow joined hers, soft but steady. Together, their light grew stronger, casting back the shadows. The creature hissed, shielding its eyes. The glow cut through its fury, forcing it to retreat a step. The traveler's fingers found the knife. He grabbed it, stood, and with every last bit of strength, drove it into the creature's chest. The beast let out one final roar, shaking the chamber. Then its body collapsed, slamming against the stone floor. The red glow of its eyes faded into nothing. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. The traveler fell to his knees, gasping for air. His knife dripped with dark blood, his body trembling. The torch sputtered, barely burning. The mother lowered her hand, her glow dimming back to its fragile light. She looked at him, her eyes wide and full of something he had not seen before. Trust without fear. The child reached out a small hand toward him, not trembling this time, but steady. The traveler let out a shaky laugh, half relief, half disbelief. "We did it," he whispered, though they could not understand his words. "We survived." He sat down heavily, back against the wall, knife still in his hand. The dead creature lay only a few steps away, its twisted body proof of what they had overcome. For the first time since entering the cave, the traveler felt a strange sense of peace. The storm outside was gone. The predator inside was defeated. And though danger might still wait beyond these walls, for this moment they were safe. The mother closed her eyes, leaning against the wall with the child curled against her. The glow of their bodies was faint but warm, filling the chamber like a soft lantern. The traveler rested his head back, exhaustion flooding through him. He knew their journey was far from over. But tonight he had made his choice, faced the darkness and won. And in that cave, with two fragile lives beside him, he understood something new. Survival was no longer just his own.